We have more information on the BLM activist who was arrested for intimidating the judge in the Dante Wright case. And as it turns out, he actually was arrested for intimidation of the judge in the Dante Wright case. So when the story first came out, we didn't know exactly what had happened to this guy, Cortez Rice. We knew that he live streamed himself going into an apartment complex, claiming this was the judge's house. And now we have more details because he's actually being charged with harassment. But this story goes well beyond just this one incident. This is about your new normal. Because as I'm reading this, I started thinking about what life is like currently. I started thinking about what life was like in Los Angeles when I lived there, so many years ago. And I'm like, man, we're in the new normal. And you may not like it, or maybe you're insulated from it. Maybe you're in the middle of nowhere. I moved mostly to the middle of nowhere, and you're not seeing it. But this is a new normal. Rampant crime. Murderers, violent criminals, violent offenders being released onto the streets to repeat offend. In the West Coast, they're just ransacking and looting stores, and it's getting worse. I don't even know, this is not even necessarily related to this, but Europe's got assisted suicide pods. And I'm just like, with the lockdowns, with the crime, with the jury intimidation, man, the world has changed dramatically in 2 years. Isn't it crazy? I mean, thinking about what's going on with these trials, these court cases, from Jussie Smollett to Kyle Rittenhouse to Dante Wright to Ahmaud Arbery, all of these cases. And I'm just thinking, this is not how things used to be only a few years ago. And what I mean by that is in these political violent moments, in these trials, everything is just reality TV. Everything is PR, media. That's it. Now, as for what's happening in California, this just shows you what happens when there's decay. There's a story we have about a San Francisco restaurant that refused to serve 2 police officers. So in the midst of mass looting and robberies, rampant crime, and human waste in the streets in California, restaurants, these people actually are on the side of chaos. It makes you wonder. You know, Jordan Peterson talks about order and chaos, and boy, did they hate him. But there is something really interesting to be said about what's going on. And I think the easiest way to explain it is the rise in chaos. And I've often referred to the woke left as a chaotic, destructive force. It is like a fire burning through the forest. It's not seeking an end goal. It's just consuming, burning, and destroying. That's what I see happening to our culture, our society. And what I mean by that is I mean globally. For the most part, I mean, it's in Europe, it's somewhat in Asia, but I think when it comes to Asia, you have China's iron fist, so they have the opposite end of this. It's going way in the direction of order to an extreme degree that's really bad. And then in the West, in Europe, in the United States, in Canada, we are seeing chaos. Now, some may argue it's order, the authoritarianism from the government, but no, it's chaos. When they release prisoners from their jail, when they release suspects and convicts from their jails, like in New York, but then put people, small business owners in them, we are living in bizarro world. Think of a society. What does it mean when they will release criminals during a pandemic and then arrest salon owners and put them in jail? It's like backwards world. It's like opposite town. Here's a story. Let's read, because we're going to get into the nitty gritty of the collapse, the chaos or whatever, because it's not just what's going on with Black Lives Matter, but it's a systemic thing, right? From the Daily Mail, quote, waiting for the gang to get up here. BLM protester is charged with harassment after he live streamed himself walking up to the apartment door of Asian judge trying Kim Potter to protest her refusal to allow cameras in court. Well, I think cameras should be allowed in court, but this is something else. They say Cortez Rice, 32, was arrested on November 29th, and the charge is unsealed on December 3rd. He is charged with tampering with a judicial officer. This is not just harassment, a felony charge. Rice on November 6th staged a protest outside what he believed to be the house of Judge Regina Chu, who had initially ruled that cameras would not be allowed in her courtroom for Potter's trial. Rice live streamed himself inside the building saying, "We are on her heels." The video is posted on YouTube and is now deleted, but copies are circulating online. What she think? We want cameras. The people deserve to know, Rice says, inside the empty corridor. Now, this is the guy who was also on video saying something to the effect that we know who Kyle Rittenhouse jurors are. We got cameras. We know who it is. Jury tampering. And it was surprising to me that this guy wasn't charged then. Rice then stood outside an apartment door and said, "I don't know if this is her crib. I think this is her crib right here. We got confirmation that this is her house right here, waiting for the gang to get up here." He was later heard saying on his live stream, "We are here for one person in particular." He yelled her name and said, "We demand transparency. We'd hate you to get kicked out of your apartment." Man, that's bold. I mean, things like this have happened in the past, but my concern is, and the reason I bring this up in the context of everything else is, sure is happening a lot and all at once. It's like we're getting ready for the crescendo, the big bang of the cymbals, and it all just and then goes spiraling down. Or maybe the crescendo already hit, and that was the election of Donald Trump, and now it's just chaos begetting chaos. Police interviewed Chu, who said she believed the intention of Rice and the others was to intimidate her and to interfere with the judicial process, the complaint read. It was unclear whether Chu lived there. A man who lives at the unit told the Minnesota Star Tribune that he purchased it from Chu and she no longer lives there. So this dude is just harassing random people. However, in her order clearing the trial for broadcast, the judge said the protest was staged at the presiding judge's home. Interesting. So maybe she switched units or something like that. Cortez last month denied trying to scare the judge. "I don't know why people are saying I was there to intimidate her or anything, because that wasn't the case. I just made a live video on it, and I was just there to make sure she can hear us." Yeah, what does that mean, she can hear us? We know where you live. Rice had previously met Cortez, showing leniency on October 4th when he was before her in court for a probation violation stemming from a conviction in 2017 for illegal weapons possession. At that hearing, she chose to continue his probation rather than send him to prison. And then they go on to just mention Kim Potter and the trial and everything that she's doing. And we'll see what happens, right? We do have an update from Legal Insurrection here, Andrew Branca. We have the jurors who are in the case. 11 jurors are white, 2 are Asian, 1 is black, evenly split between men and women. The trial begins Wednesday, December 8th, and it will be covered live on Legal Insurrection from Andrew Branca. So, we'll see what happens with that. But I certainly think it's fair to point out that when it comes to all of these trials, from Rittenhouse to Arbery, the threat is clear. Everybody knows it. Black Lives Matter knows they will find out who you are. They will stalk you. They will come for the jury. They will come for the judges. This is your new normal. Order is broken. And, I'm going to bring it up again. There may have been an interesting legal question as to what happened in the Ahmaud Arbery case. And it could be up for appeal. So it's not the same as what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse. But I can't believe there's so many conservatives cheering for the verdict in the Ahmaud Arbery case, because at the very least, this was muddy. Now, the left will lie and say a man was jogging and these racists lynched him, when the real story is neighborhood plagued by felony robberies or burglaries. And the police believed that this guy was the suspect. And some local residents tried to stop him so that the police could come and question or detain him. And then the fight broke out and the suspect was shot and killed. And the guy, Arbery, didn't live there. I mean, it's a complicated story. But so long as you get conservatives willing to cheer for that, they are cheering for the flames that are burning down everything else. Because at the very least, I will say this, that case is not clear cut. And I actually would say, outside of the letter of the law on the citizen's arrest, it seems like these dudes were trying to stop a guy who may have stolen a gun, who was burglarizing homes. And so what? What do we do? When you have someone who doesn't live in your neighborhood, it's not about race. Someone who doesn't live there, repeatedly coming after a string of burglaries. Don't bother even trying to confront or stop him or even ask him any questions, because if he attacks you, then you committed an illegal citizen's arrest, and thus you are going to prison for the rest of your life. And not only that, the guy who filmed it, him too. This is chaos. It's chaos. From the Daily Mail. Portland police tell woke city's crime victims they're on their own. Residents warned of delayed responses to all but the most serious 911 calls due to spiraling crime and staff shortages amid record-breaking murder rate. I have told you this before. I think Jesse Kelly was tweeting it earlier. These people have said, since I met them at Occupy Wall Street, from the ashes of the old, we shall build anew. You know what? You know what show you should check out? The Order. It's like a college drama with magic and wizards and werewolves. And it's not the greatest show. It's all right. I watched it. I enjoyed it. But you're going to love this. As much as we all like to complain about these woke TV shows, Brie Larson, everyone complained about her. The Order, spoiler alert, in the second season, the villains are communists. I loved it. I was like, hey, finally we're getting something on the other end of this. Like, whenever they make a movie or a TV show like Harry Potter, it's always an allusion to fascism or Nazis. I'm like, we get it. Those things are bad. But like, what about the communists, yo? So they literally have a villain who's a communist, and they literally say, like, the plot, great, I'm glad they made a show like this. The bad guy in the second season, one of them, knows that the improper use of magic will result in chaotic eruptions, the spreading of chaos, quite literally referred to as chaos. Man, whoever wrote this must listen to Jordan Peterson. And the response from the communists is that fire from the ashes, we will build anew, or something to that effect. And I'm like, whoa. The people who write that show watch Jordan Peterson or listen to what I've been talking about for the past 10 years. Great to see it. But that's the point. That is literally what we are seeing. There are elements of extremist factions. They fan the flames of chaos. They want the system to burn, because once you burn it all to the ground, then you can build something different with a different perspective or a different framework. They do not like the Judeo-Christian moral frameworks, which I happen to think are pretty good. Not like, Mosaic or law or Sharia law or anything like that. No, I mean, like, at current, we have kept a lot of great ideas that have resulted, from these moral frameworks. And we've gotten rid of a lot of the really bad ones. We've reformed, and it's pretty good. But the woke left has no real moral framework other than there's no truth but power. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that concept because that's not true. There is truth. There is objective reality. There is still, to a certain extent, an individual subjective morality, but there are some things we all hold to be true. And, it's hard to map these things. There's great philosophical questions here. But what the woke left has done is they've exploited philosophical quandary and conundrum to manipulate people into believing stupid things like there is no objective reality or that men and women don't exist. They've actually done this. Or 2 + 2 actually equals 5. It doesn't. But this is the game they play. And now, here's what's fascinating. You've got this story out of Portland. And we've got this story out of San Francisco. Look at this from the New York Post. How looting turned the most upscale part of San Francisco into a ghost town. Isn't that the point for the communists? For the extremists, for the far left that want to burn down everything? There's this viral tweet. This woman, she was like, today was my last day as a non-union employee. Now, my next day, I will be entering, Starbucks as the first unionized worker. And I'm like, that's cool. I'm not a big fan of unions because of the laws around them, but I'm a big fan of collective bargaining. So it's a double-edged sword in that regard. But the woman's bio said the working class and the owning class have nothing in common. And I'm like, man, that just means too much. I see all these memes about how a landlord isn't a job. And I'm like, let me explain to you all that, yes, it quite literally is. It's really annoying. And I think most people don't understand the amount of work that has to go into maintaining a property. They don't get it. They think just because someone owns property, they're not doing any work. And it's like, it's actually like the landlord is providing a service to the tenant. Now, there are questions about ownership and stuff like that, but a tenant can simply apply, a contract is formed, they pay a security deposit, they move in, they pay rent, and then guess what? That rent, for the most part, pays the mortgage for a lot of people. And the left complains about that. And they're like, oh, so you're getting all this money for free into your equity. And it's like, yeah. And the tenants have legal rights to not pay rent when certain things aren't being upkept. And the landlord doesn't have that privilege. If you own your home and your stove breaks, good luck, find a stove. If you're a tenant and your stove breaks, you don't even have to pay rent anymore because the utilities have broken. Maybe not a stove, I think a stove, but like if a toilet breaks, no joke. You can withhold rent and be like, these must be fixed. And then the owner has to front those costs and cover those things for you. They got to deal with a lot having to do with taxes in the city and regulations. And the tenants have it easy. They don't want to admit this stuff because they need a narrative. But I mean, you talk to a lot of people. I know people, I have family members who legit said, I don't want to own. It's too much of a hassle. I want to be able to rent. However, I do think homeownership is very important for most people, especially millennials. I just think it's silly that you have this perspective among the left that unless you're doing things exactly the way they demand or they tell you, you're a leech or a parasite, when quite literally they are doing the same thing. They are leeches and they are parasites. So they turn the wealthy upscale area into a ghost town. I got to be honest, I'm not a fan of these areas. I don't like this upscale, overpriced garbage. I don't dress that way or whatever. I wear a button up that cost me like $30 and a beanie, and I'm not even wearing the button up right now. I'm not a fan of the Hunger Games capital city people. I'm not a fan of the elites and the billionaires and the 1% and all that stuff. But I mean, there's challenges to how we solve for that. The left's idea is plague the areas, destroy them, and then build something new. It's happening in New York. It's happening in San Francisco. And you will not convince me it is not intentional. That is not to say that there is a cabal of individuals twirling their mustaches. But look at Bill de Blasio in New York City as he burns the city to the ground, figuratively. And the rioters burn other cities to the ground, quite literally, or at least to a certain degree literally. Bill de Blasio, what does he do? He says, we're going to buy up these buildings for pennies on the dollar and convert it into public housing. From the ashes of the old, we shall build anew. Everything done by de Blasio is destroying property values, destroying industry in that city. And then when these people are forced to sell for pennies on the dollar, which is going to have a big impact on whoever's invested in that, and it's not just rich people, Bill de Blasio can come in and be like, that building was $10 million, a month ago. And because of my policies, now it's only $1 million, or more realistically, 5 or whatever. But then he can buy it up. And this is basically the plot of RoboCop or other movies. The wealthy elites destroy the neighborhood so they can buy it for cheap. It's been the same old story we've seen going back to the civil rights area with blockbusting. You know what blockbusting was? It was when they would intentionally target a white suburb full of people who had racist fears. They'd buy a home, they'd move in a minority family, typically a black family, and use the fears of racism to drive down property values and buy up the homes for 20% off, then evict the black family, and then raise the prices back up. That is disgusting. And outside of, look, I look at what's going on with New York and San Francisco and Portland and what they're doing, and I don't see a big difference. It is not the same as blockbusting, but it is a form of it. That they would intentionally destroy property values to destroy people's private property and their revenue, their equity, so they can come in and snatch it all up. They did it before, they're doing it now, and they will do it again. They've just found a different way to do it. Oh no, because of the pandemic, we're gonna have to shut your business down. Then the business says we can't afford to stay open, so we have to sell. And then along comes a spider saying, hey, you need to sell? Sorry about the pandemic. What's it worth? Wow. It was worth $500,000. I'll give you 300. What are you going to do? Who are you going to sell to? I'll take it because it's worthless. And then they buy it for cheap and then give it a year or whatever when they start reopening things and the property value starts climbing back up. And that's how the game is played. And they do it back and forth. I mean, before what we started seeing at the beginning of the pandemic was wealthy people buying up cheap properties in rural areas. I mean, take a look at Montana and Wyoming and you'll be like, how is that so expensive? I take a look at, the property value from, the neighborhoods I lived in. There was a house. I was looking at my old neighborhood in Chicago from where I grew up. I'm like, I wonder what these houses are going for. And like a year ago, $180K, south side of Chicago, $160K. Today, $350. And I'm just like, man. Now, you can argue that's technically good for a lot of the people who want to sell and move out. The point is, they buy up these cheaper properties when they're low, smash the system in such a way that downtown properties, urban properties go down, suburban and rural properties go up, and now they own those properties. They sell them, they buy the city properties, and they do it. They bounce themselves all the way up, always taking the advantage. That's the name of the game, baby. So look at this. San Francisco is a ghost town, right? We have this story from Citizen Free Press. It's actually a story from a local, news outlet, but I've got an aggregate here with some information. They say San Francisco restaurant refuses service to police. Apparently, they've issued an apology saying they made a mistake and it was unfortunate. This is interesting. It's the workers. The workers agree with the chaos and the destruction. You know what, man? It's hard because when sometimes you want to give baby their bottle. Give baby their bottle. Let them, there you go. These young people who are like, we want the system to burn. Okay, well, then you deserve the system you've asked for. And I want to see what these people do when they realize, where's my water? I have no food. They don't get it. Communists love to play this stupid game of like, the farmers should own the farm, right? They're like, the people working on the farm are the ones doing the labor and they should own it. And then, we who believe in meritocracy and science, like literally the fact that some people have skills and some don't, go, you cannot take the farmer, replace him with the farmhands. Because as much as the farmhand might understand how to drive the tractor, they don't know how to maintain the resources and the system. Management is literally a function. Managerial power is a real thing. It takes a lot to build a system. There's a great TED talk on making a toaster from scratch. So I'll break it down for you. A guy tries to make a toaster from scratch himself. It was impossible. In the end, the abomination that he did built lasted only about 20 seconds. He turned it on, it heated up, and then broke. Whereas you can go to a store and buy a toaster for $10. Go to a thrift store and they got a whole stack of them for free. We could not make it on our own, because of all of the different capabilities and systems in play that bring these resources together. And more importantly, literally logistics, the managerial power, the individual who is tracking what's going on, writing it down, and directing things in different directions. And then what happens to these communists is they say, you don't need those people. You work on the farm. You know how it works. And then all of a sudden you have a bunch of people being like, yeah, I don't know where this stuff goes or where it comes from. And then what happens? Everybody starves. We've seen it time and time again. These young people are too dumb to know this. They're too driven by emotion and greed. And I believe greed has overcome this country, is taking over greed and these vices. I'll tell you, man, it's literally the 7 deadly sins, all of them. You've got young people who want fame and fortune. They want easy living. They want money for nothing and chicks for free. So they think, they'll make an Instagram channel to do these things. They won't do any real hard work. They should just get to have it. So they vote for people who promise them all the world without having to do anything for it. We'll tax the rich. Don't worry. We'll raise the minimum wage. There's no need for you to worry about labor. In fact, how about this? Universal basic income, quite literally, will give you stuff for free. Yeah, that can't last forever. And ultimately, it's going to lead to everything breaking down. But my friends, this is the new normal. There's a viral story. This is what Jesse Kelly was tweeting about. They let out this murderer guy, and then he goes and murders again, and then they let him out again, and then he murders again or something. And Jesse said, this is, I think it was Jesse Kelly, maybe I'm wrong, but he was like, this is what they do. The communists, they release criminals because it creates chaos, and it makes people worried and panic and then call for more draconian measures or something like that. It makes it easier for the extremists to take over, because now they're going to be like, look at all the discontent. This is the fault of the system. It's not your fault. And then people will vote for the ideologues. They'll vote for the Bill de Blasios, who will burn the city to the ground. Well, we have a chance coming up, and it's the primaries. Get out in the Republican primaries, vote out these establishment, neocon types and these do-nothing Republicans, bring in some populists who want to protect this country and its values, and then come 2022 midterms, you must vote. But don't forget to vote at the state level. Figure out who your state rep is. Figure out who your state senator is. Who's your governor? Figure out who your comptroller is. City council, all of that stuff. It matters. Local is important and dare I say more important than a lot of the federal stuff. But you got to get out there and you got to get active now, because now is the time. It's coming. Look at what's happening across the board from these trials where Black Lives Matter knows they can intimidate and they get away with it. And at the very least, if the individual doesn't, the deed is done. The movement itself is the cudgel. The one guy, Cortez, can show up to the judge's house and say these things, and she might be like, well, we arrested the guy. But what about the rest of the BLM movement? I mean, she certainly must know. They all know who she is and where she lives. Same thing for all the jurors. We can't sustain this. But I don't know what we do, because it seems like it's all just crumbling. Other than what I just said in getting out and getting active. Actually, I probably should say I know what we can do right now, which may help. And that's, voting locally and voting out these Republican do-nothings. Otherwise, we sit back and we watch it all burn. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.